Hello and welcome to another standard video here in the preview event for Through the Omen paths. Today we're checking out this blue, black and red or grixis colored reanimator deck, which now gets to play not only Zombify at 4 mana to return a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield, but we've also picked up the superior Spider-Man, aka Kavero Mind Bitten, a 4/4 which can enter as a copy of any creature card in a graveyard, except its name will stay the same, and it's a 4/4 spider human hero in addition to its other types. So if we do that, we have to exile the card we are copying, but that's basically giving us another 4 mana reanimation effect alongside Zombify, and Kavero has a few advantages. While at first glance we might be worried about shrinking down some huge creature we're reanimating, we can actually turn it into an advantage when it comes to cards like Threefold Thunderhulk, which is normally a 7 mana creature that enters with 3+1/+1 counters, generating 3 gnome tokens in the process. But since those gnome tokens scale with the power on the Thunderhulk, now if we make it a 4/4 as base power and toughness, it will enter with 3 additional counters on top of that, meaning a 7/7 Thunderhulk, which will now make 7 gnome tokens, so that can get out of hand pretty quickly, since we'll get even more of those tokens whenever a Thunderhulk attacks. And then besides the interaction with the Mind Bitten, Thunderhulk also plays very well with Arden the Usurper, which is another way to reanimate creatures from any graveyard, turning them into 5/5 demons, which will then also have Menace, Lifelink, and Haste for as long as we control Arden. So then ideally we can discard both Arden and the Thunderhulk. Then we can reanimate Arden using either one of our 4 mana effects, and then Arden reanimates Thunderhulk as now an 8/8, making 8 gnome tokens when it enters, and we get to immediately attack, making another 8 gnome tokens, leaving us with 16 1/1s, having attacked the opponent for 8 and gained 8, so that's another very powerful interaction. And then Arden, as you may know, also combos very well with Fear of Missing Out, because if we can enable Delirium and attack with a Fear, we get an additional attack step where we get to untap one of our creatures, and with an additional attack step we also get to trigger Arden an additional time to reanimate yet another creature out of the graveyard, all in the same turn, so we can potentially chain together multiple Fears of Missing Out and then still top it off with a Thunderhulk at the very end. And then our last creature we're trying to reanimate is a Neach, Pinnacle Pariah. In paper this is Dr. Octopus, a 7 mana 4/8, giving other villains we control +2/+2. Don't have any other villains, but we could maybe still control them if we reanimate them out of the opponent's graveyard using either Kavero, which can also target creatures in the opponent's graveyard, or using Arden, which can also do that. And then the important part here, our maximum hand size is 8, and at the beginning of our end step, if we have fewer than 8 cards in hand, we get to draw cards equal to the difference. So this will make sure we always have a full grip, which will then make it easier to set up our other reanimation synergies. So there are essentially 3 categories to this deck. We've got our 12 reanimation targets, we've got our 8 reanimation spells, and then the rest are all ways to discard cards from our hand and draw, so we can set up our graveyard in the first place by discarding our payoffs and digging towards our reanimation spells. And we also have a few ways to fill the graveyard with a Black Overlord. We get to mill 4, and we can return a creature from our graveyard to our hand, so that can get back one of our many creatures that help us discard and draw. But we can also maybe find Kavero, which is a creature that doubles up as a reanimation spell, so these also have excellent synergy. And then our other discard outlets include Bitter Triumph, can discard as an additional cost or pay 3 life to destroy creature or planeswalker at instant speed. Could also consider the new Knife Trick, which for 1 mana can deal 3 to a creature and then discard as an additional cost, so can maybe play a mix of those. And then at 3 mana, I'm playing a split of Kiora and Terza, which can both essentially discard 2 cards and draw 2. The order is slightly different. With Terza, we first have to discard and then draw, whereas with Kiora, we first get to draw and then discard, which is preferable. But we do get a 3/3 with Haste, which can get in right away. Kiora, not super likely to make an 8/8 token, but not impossible if we fill the graveyard with a Black Overlord first. So this is a very streamlined deck, but it's also very powerful if it gets to enact its game plan. And then the mana base also picked up the exclusive Nightclub, which has the new Mayhem mechanic. So if we discarded it to one of our other effects, we can still play it from our graveyard, and then in this case it will enter tapped and cost us 2 life, but that's also maybe a source of card advantage. And then we've got the Theater to surveil. Watery Grave has our only shock land in the Grixis colors, still waiting on the other ones. And those also play well with Verge lands, which will then produce both colors. And then a couple basics to round it out, but there's definitely a few ways you can configure a Grixis mana base. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. We have a red and black mana. We've got Fear as a discard outlet, same with the Triumph, but no payoffs yet. I don't think I keep this. We're missing both lanes and finishers. And this is better. We are missing a reanimation spell, but we've got a few looks. So then I probably keep Fear over Bitter Triumph, although it's close. If we're up against a control deck, we may not get a lot of mileage out of the Bitter Triumph, and there's Zombify. So turn 4, assuming I draw an extra land here, we'll be able to reanimate the Pariah, which can then draw us a lot of cards. Well, let's see what we're up against. Tapped Watery Grave. Yeah, I'll still discard my payoff here, even though that will give them a bit of information, perhaps. Alright, opponent with Goben drew another reanimation spell. So if I want to guarantee a land drop, I should discard 2 cards. And then I guess we keep Zombify. Alright, my land might be tapped, but we can get in for 5. Opponent's gonna connive. Maybe play the Nightclub from the graveyard. And we'll see if they keep up removal, which might actually work out to our advantage since we cannot zombify anyways. Alright, a Braid would not have been enough, but sadly I cannot zombify yet. I'll keep another Zombify in case the first one doesn't work out. Alright, this could backfire, as our opponent can now steal our card from the graveyard. So they might also be a Reanimator deck. Well, good thing there's a second copy, so we both get to draw 8. So, yeah. Let's go for it. And then I can surveil or just play this tapped. Alright, Thunderhulk we would also like to reanimate, although currently missing a discard outlet. Monument payoff for discarding. And yeah, this is a villain, so gets pumped by Dr. Octopus. Bitter Triumph triggers the Monument. So yeah, we kind of set our opponent up here. So what am I hoping for? Maybe Overlord, mill Arden, and then hope that Arden can deliver. Especially with Delirium, we could do some damage. Monument could maybe make some treasure to still interact. Play a Mako. Find Kiora. Don't have the mana to cast Kiora, discard Thunderhulk and Zombify, so I have to go for Overlord, Impend, and have to mill Arden here. Which we did, and double fear of missing out. So I don't have to get anything back, but I guess it doesn't hurt to just get back the Mind Bitten, for instance. No, you know what, let's decline. And then Zombify Arden, which will trigger and get back Fear of Missing Out. Can discard a Thunderhulk. attack. Can just attack with one fear for now, I suppose. Untap itself. And get back another fear. Can discard another Thunderhulk. And then now we can go all out, and that should be game. But yeah, chaining together Fear with Arden is what this deck is all about. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand just needs to hit a few more land drops, but we've got all the pieces we need, really. So try and keep a land on top. Bitter Triumph. I'm gonna decline. Opponent's black-green. Rakshasa probably is gonna get returned out of the graveyard at some point. For now, Fear discards Pariah, could discard Arden. Got a few options. Could also start with Overlord. Let's start here. Because if I only have one creature to reanimate, I would want to reanimate something that draws me 8 cards. Or at least gets me to 8 cards in hand. Which will then make it easier to set up Arden. Could also see the Demon Enchantment to draw a card and drain for 2. Nope, opponent's gonna eventually exile our graveyard with Chapter 3 as well. But in the meantime, we can set up our graveyard with Chapter 2. So I don't think I mind. Can play another Fear, discard Arden as well. And then next turn, Zombify, hopefully get back Arden, which in turn gets back my Pariah. At least that's the plan. We've got land 4. Just gotta hope they don't have instant speed removal. Could also lose 3 life here. But I'll discard an Overlord, or maybe a Fear, which is good with Arden, if we can chain it together. Opponent plays a World Wagon, so they seem tapped out. So we can set up our play. We will be adding sorcery to the graveyard. So then I have Delirium enabled. So I can get back another Fear first, since we'll get to trigger that again. So this could just be game over. So this attacks, untaps itself. We've added another enchantment to the graveyard. So I can go for another Fear. Still have Delirium. Can discard a land. And these attack. I guess I could have also attacked with the first Fear. And then now we can go for Neach if we'd like. And attack all out. And I can still untap an extra creature here. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand has most of the pieces we need, except for black mana and maybe an extra land or 2. But if I keep this and don't draw the lands I need, I'm not doing anything at all. So I think I still mulligan. This is a bit more balanced. I am missing a discard outlet. Can maybe get rid of the tri-land and keep the surveils. And then by surveilling an expensive creature into the graveyard, we can also set up our reanimation spells. Fear of missing out is good. And then Nightclub I could keep, although if I want to Fear on 2, then I'm not going to be able to set up a reanimation on 4 necessarily. But maybe I shouldn't be greedy, since I can just play Fear turn 3 and then either 4 mana spell on 4, get back a Thunderhulk. Probably go for the Mind Bitten, so we get a larger Thunderhulk and therefore more tokens. So for now I could Surveil again. Bitter Triumph could be worth keeping. So if we don't want to cast Fear, we can just remove something instead. Our opponent on some sort of Grixis discard deck with a monument. Take 5 from our casa. Can also use the Mind Bitten to essentially reanimate opposing creatures. If I play Fear, I get Artifact, Creature in the Graveyard, but of course we're gonna miss those types once we reanimate it. I guess we can hang on to Bitter Triumph, so I don't take too much damage from the Mako, and so we don't necessarily reveal our intentions. Alright, I guess this is maybe a better target. Take 1. And then now if I use the Mind Bitten, we get a 4/4 Thunderhulk with 3 counters and make 7 tokens. So that's pretty strong. So even if they remove it, we'll still have lots of leftover tokens. If we get to attack, we get to make even more. So far so good. Opponent maybe has a Knife Trick, can take out 1 token. And then trigger the monuments as well as the Mako. See the Mayhem card in the graveyard. And we get to untap. Okay, so this also has an activated ability. Sacrifice to put a +1 counter on it. Yeah, I guess we can just activate this twice. And then attack. So we get 9 tokens. Could have also first attacked and then sacked the ones they blocked to get in with more 1/1s, but then we get fewer tokens on the back end. So now we can maybe cross the finish line with our 1/1s. So not too worried about the Rakshasa. This copies the Mako. So they seem dead on board. Could also discard another Thunderhulk and zombify it for what it's worth. Maybe we draw something else fun. Alright. And smash. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a hand that just needs to either draw a discard outlet or mill something juicy with Overlord. Yeah, I think we can try. And Fear is exactly what we were looking for. Tempted to discard Thunderhulk before we discard Arden. Although maybe I can start by milling with Overlord. Alright, we milled the Thunderhulk. Can grab a Light Shatter, cast that on 3, discarding Arden and maybe another Thunderhulk. Or we can try and chain together Fear with Arden to get multiple creatures back in 1 turn. In terms of Delirium, we have a land, artifact, and creature. So we'll see. Yeah, if I discard Fear to Tersa alongside Arden, we'll have Delirium. Although, I guess if we bring back the Fear, that's no longer the case. Opponent, in the meantime, drawing with Memory, getting extra counters on Goben. Drew the land, which we still needed. So, definitely discarding Arden. And then, I guess it's Fear. And then if I bring back the Fear, I can discard the Overlord, which then still sets up Delirium. Alright, so we've got a plan here. Our opponent could interfere by just destroying the reanimated Arden, in which case we can still pivot and go for Thunderhulk to get a bunch of tokens. But our opponent's got their own Tersa, discarding Kefka. Also plays well with these Grixis discard synergies. 2 counters from memory. But we're about to make a big move. Alright, let's go for it. Turns into Arden. And get back Fear. And then I could discard Bitter Triumph as well, but let's go for the Overlord. So we have Delirium, this can attack. And then now I can go for Thunderhulk. And those can attack as well. And have 16 tokens left over on turn 4 while attacking for lethal. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand is missing a few elements. Mostly lands and ideally a discard outlet. Could maybe find it with Overlords. The Surveil could also help. So I think there's enough potential here. On the draw we also get an extra look. But we might be a little slow out of the gates. Another Overlord. So for now we need to prioritize lanes. And Arden's also good to have in the graveyard. Found a lane. So yeah, I'm not opposed to using the Overlord now, and then next turn I can play tap land and impend once again. Opponent cycling a Gravestalker, so maybe a black-green graveyard deck. And Kiora is a good one to help us discard even more. Won't be able to play it unless I draw an untapped land here. Ooh, and Duskmourn's Claim. Yeah, that makes sense with all these expensive graveyard creatures that have a high mana value, which would then deal a lot of damage to us with a Claim. So we drew an untapped land, that's perfect. Can go for Tersa or Kiora. Don't have a strong preference. I guess we'll get in for haste damage. And then discard Thunderhulk. Could go for an Overlord as well, or another Arden. Got options. I guess I'll discard another Arden since we're not hardcasting it. So then I'll still need to hit an extra lane drop before we can play the Mind's Bitten to reanimate Arden. Opponent's got their own Overlord. Okay. Do we get the land? Claim triggers, and we found an extra lane, so that helps us out. Anything in the opponent's graveyard we would like to exile, since we can also choose their graveyard. But I imagine we go for Arden. Which in turn gets back Thunderhulk. And smash. Get 16 tokens, and our opponent scoops it up. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand is a little slow, but we do have most of what we need. Just need to draw a few untapped lands along the way, ideally. Discard Thunderhulk, turn 4 we can bring it back. And then we have several ways to discard. Ideally find something like Arden along the way, so we can use Arden to bring back a hasty Thunderhulk. But even just making a 7/7 with 7 tokens is pretty solid. Alright, it's all nightclubs. Can also use the Mayhem ability, so maybe next turn I'll go Fear. I guess discard Nightclub is an option. Although we actively want Thunderhulk in the graveyard. But it is a way of kind of drawing a card, so that might actually be worth it. Alright, and then... now I wouldn't be able to set up Thunderhulk turn 4, which was a drawback of not just discarding it to begin with. But maybe we can dig for Arden to make it a bit more exciting. Our opponent with Kellen joins up. And Bramble Familiar, so that's a nice combo, as they'll be able to fetch Quest next turn. Okay. Can go for Fear, keep a Bitter Triumph. As opposed to Kiora. So maybe got a little bit too cute with earlier Fear play, which might cost us. We'll see what they hit with fetch quests. Nothing too amazing, mostly lanes. Kellen joins up, can also be paired with a new transform creatures, as the front side is cheap and can be plotted, but you can still cast the more expensive backside of those cards. Kinda similar to Tybalt back in the day. And then we see the new 4/4, which we can Bitter Triumph. Can just pay 3. I guess maybe that's okay for now. Upside of maybe discarding a creature is setting up Delirium a bit better. But we're about to lift most types out of the graveyard. Hit you for 4. Can they answer my 7/7? If they do, we still have enough tokens to maybe cross the finish line. So yeah, we could have done this a whole turn sooner. Can maybe set up Delirium. Can either impend or cast it for 5. But this way I can still cast Kiora. Or, what's even better, is Mind-Bitten Arden, which in turn can also get back a Fear. But yeah, we're not gonna have Delirium here, sadly. But yeah, it doesn't matter. Opponent's pretty dead. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand is missing a reanimation spell. Got some good ways to fill the graveyard. Overlord can also find our 4-mana reanimation creature. So I think it's still worth keeping. Opponent on a spider deck. So I think we'll start with the Overlord, since I don't exactly know which creature I want to discard to the Fear. Although having a 2/3 blocker would be nice. So it's a close call. I'll start with the Overlord still. Could also just Bitter Triumph the Twitching Doll, but there are scarier creatures we might want to deal with, such as the Scions of the Spider. Alright, so can keep Tersa and use that to discard. Sadly, milled Zombify and not the 4-mana creature, but it's still a sorcery for Delirium, which could come in handy. Opponent with another Twitching Doll and Llanowar Elves, so plenty of mana. Alright, I think Tersa discards my expensive spells is the play for now. Unless we want to discard the Fears to maybe set up Arden and loop Fear out of the graveyard, which is also reasonable. Still need to hit an extra land drop regardless. So, yeah, I guess I could go Fear Thunderhulk. Found the lands, now I just need the reanimation spell. This will draw them some cards. And now Spinner can find replacement creatures. There we go, that's what we needed. So get back Arden, which in turn gets back Fear of Missing Out, which can discard another Fear of Missing Out. We still have Delirium. This can attack. Untap itself. Opponent deciding if they want to trade. So bring back another Fear. And then we still have sorcery, land, artifact, creature. Could add another Overlord into the mix, or now I might want to discard Doc Ock. This attacks. Untaps itself. And then I think we still have lethal if I get back Thunderhulk here, since we'll have 13 Power of Menace. And we'll leave lots of tokens behind as well. So yeah, that was a speed run to 7 wins. Certainly the deck that has impressed me the most so far in the preview event. And yeah, maybe didn't get to reanimate Dr. Octopus as much as I would have liked, but just winning on turn 4 is probably good enough. And yeah, the combo between the Superior Spider-Man, aka Cavero, with the threefold Thunderhulk is quite nice, getting to immediately make 7 tokens, and then having the same interaction with Arden and Thunderhulk is quite nice. So maybe a card that has been overlooked in the archetype, but maybe now with Superior Spider-Man, we've got an additional reason to include it in these Grixis Reanimator decks. Still a couple flex slots for sure, maybe 4 copies of Dr. Octopus aren't necessary, and we can instead focus more on just looping Fear of Missing Out with Arden. But yeah, overall very impressed by what the deck is capable of, and excited to see where the deck goes next. Of course, if this deck becomes too popular, Graveyard Hate can shut it down, so then this deck will need to adapt to deal with Graveyard Hate, but that's also not impossible since we are in 3 colors. If artifacts are exiling our graveyard, we can add cards like Abrade as removal to deal with them as well, so there are still options available there. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.